there we go. We're live. Hey guys, it's Caitlin and Alexis again.
Hey.
We're back for another information, sharing some stuff about, this week it's going to be about domestic violence cases. So some DV cases. It's going to be a two-parter. So we're going to do a little bit this week and then more in 2 weeks to wrap it up. But do you just want to introduce the firm again? Just for our
Sure, yeah. So what we're trying to do, we are a criminal defense firm here in Colorado Springs. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to do these live videos for everyone who may have questions about cases, questions about what we do, and we would like this to be interactive if at all possible. So if you guys have questions, shoot us a message here. We'll try to answer them as in real time as we can.
Yeah.
But we plan on doing these live videos every week on Fridays just to touch base with everybody. So if you have questions, just submit in advance, send them to us. I'm happy to answer anything that we can.
Awesome. So we're gonna today we're gonna cover about the DV cases. We're gonna cover from like the actual incident to all the way up to negotiations in the actual case once that gets there. So the first question / clarification that I've been seeing a lot of is just what different types of DV cases do we have, and then what do we see the most of?
Okay, so a lot of people think that DV cases are a specific charge. It's kind of a misnomer though. So DV or domestic violence is actually like a modifier to a case. So the way that you can think of it is you don't have like a red ball. You just have a ball, but it is the type of ball that it is. So with a case, any kind of case can be a domestic violence case. If you add on domestic violence, that's just adding on a modifier, or it's called a sentence enhancer, to the case itself. So truly anything can be charged as domestic violence. I've seen DUIs charged as domestic violence. We have tampering charges as domestic violence, but the normal ones that we see are things like third-degree assault, harassment, violating someone's rights by taking a phone away from them, anywhere from those cases that are misdemeanors all the way up to felony strangulation cases. You can even have domestic violence burglaries where someone's breaking into someone's house as an act of domestic violence. What makes it a domestic violence case is if it is between two people who are in an intimate relationship. And intimate does not necessarily mean sexual. It can be anything from being boyfriend, girlfriend. So we've seen domestic violence cases with kiddos in school as young as like 10 years old. It can be any type of situation where there was a previous intimate relationship or a previous sexual relationship, like between ex-spouses, all the way up to people who are currently in a relationship. Domestic violence doesn't differentiate between gender, age, sex, anything like that. But what we see is domestic violence as a tag is when someone is charged with doing something criminally that is done in a way to control, harass, or retaliate against another person. We often hear about this whole idea of power and control dynamics. So in domestic violence cases, what the charge is saying is that the person that's being charged with this crime is doing this in a way not only that is criminal, but it is in a way to act in a retaliation way or in a controlling way to their intimate partner in some way.
Okay, awesome, good to know. That's a lot of info. So it doesn't discriminate against
anyone, anybody can be charged.
Anyone.
Yeah.
So then, also related to the DV cases that we see, the mandatory protection order. So what does that mean in Colorado? What is that for us?
So there's a whole lot of mandatory law surrounding domestic violence cases. So with domestic violence cases, the reason that domestic violence cases are treated differently than other cases is because we have seen in Colorado a lot of legislation going through where we're trying to protect victims of domestic violence, which that is great. The problem is it doesn't always take into account an average situation or a misunderstanding. Yeah. Domestic violence laws have become much more strict in Colorado, and we have what's called a mandatory arrest law. So if someone is charged or accused with committing an act of domestic violence, there's a mandatory arrest. There's no like getting a bond and paying a bond and not having to go to jail. You are going to jail if you're charged with domestic violence. Part of that is there's also going to be a mandatory protection order issued. Now, a mandatory protection order is different in a criminal case than in like a protection order case where you can file for a protection order. People sometimes get these confused. You may have heard of people saying, well, I want to take out a protection order against this person. you can still do that in a domestic violence case. But for domestic violence criminal charges, a mandatory order enters saying, hey, you cannot have contact with this person. You cannot be at the home where they are, even if it's your own home. You have to vacate the home. You can't have any contact. That means any contact, like texting, chatting, FaceTiming. We see a lot of people trying to Snapchat. That's not allowed either. And you can't have indirect contact. So you can't, like if I was charged with domestic violence and I had my significant other, I couldn't say, hey, Caitlin, go tell my significant other this.
Okay.
Because that's indirect contact using a third party.
Okay.
So with these mandatory protection laws, especially in a case where we see a lot of domestic violence arrests where someone will call the cops and they're in an argument with their spouse and they've said, well, we just want the cops to come take them out of the house. The problem is if someone makes a call like that, the cops hear domestic violence and they're gonna go arrest someone. So even though the person who was calling the police said, well, I just wanted them to be taken out, I didn't want them to get arrested, that puts this whole slew of things into motion. So what ends up happening is we have a case where I've seen so many cases where a man and a woman have been in a marriage for 30 plus years. They have a really bad argument. They're having a rough spot in their marriage. Let's say the wife calls the police to just get him out of the house. The police arrest him, but then once he's arrested, that mandatory protection order means he cannot go home. If he's lived there for 30 years, he can't go home because the protection order has that address listed. Yeah. So protection orders, especially in domestic violence cases, can be really, really difficult to deal with, especially if you've never been through this process, because you don't have your house, you don't have your spouse, you don't have your clothes. You're basically just sitting out there trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah. So in those types of cases, how do you get to your belongings? How do you get to your stuff? How does that work?
So there are a lot of moving parts in domestic violence cases, and they happen pretty quickly. When someone's arrested for an act of domestic violence, they're immediately taken to the jail. They're put into the jail, and they're held there without bond until a hearing can be set. Because in Colorado, with domestic violence cases, to protect domestic violence victims, the domestic violence laws say that you have to have a hearing to see whether or not this person gets a bond.
Yeah.
And at that hearing, the person who's named as the victim in the case has the right to talk. So someone is going to be sitting in jail until they have that hearing. Okay. Depending on when you're arrested, it could be the next day or it could be 2 or 3 days down the road. Okay. So once you have that hearing, at the hearing, the person who's the named victim in the case can speak. They have the right to speak. It's a constitutional right in Colorado that they have to speak at this hearing. And you can also request things if you're charged. So to your question, one thing that you can request is if there's not a modification of the protection order to allow you to have contact, like in the case I just described with a couple that's been married for 30 years, if the wife comes in and says, no, I want my husband to come home, and the judge grants that, then he can go home. But if there isn't that situation, if the protection order is kept in place, you can request what's called a keep the peace order. A keep the peace order is an order issued by a judge. And what that does is it's a piece of paper that you take to the sheriffs, and the sheriffs will go with you to your home, making sure that nothing happens. They're there to kind of keep the peace, which is why it's called a keep the peace order. And you have about 10 to 15 minutes to go in, grab some clothes, grab some toiletries, get what you need out of the house, and then you have to leave again. Okay. But that's at least one way that the law allows for, if there is a true domestic violence case happening, at least you can go in and get some of your things that you'll need. Like so many people are arrested in the middle of the night without shoes or without their phone. So at least you can go and have that opportunity to get some essential items.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. Like you still have access to your belongings.
It's a one-time thing though, so you gotta get in, get out.
What you can.
Yeah.
So just in general, if someone decides to hire us to represent them, how do we serve them in a DV case? Just like an overview. How does it play out?
So when someone hires any criminal defense lawyer in Colorado Springs, the lawyer will have to talk with that person about the charges that have been levied against them. So what I do in my practice and what Dan does is we sit down and we talk with the lawyer. The lawyer talks with the client and says, okay, these are the charges that you have against you. This is what you're facing. These are the possible penalties. And these are the other things that you need to know that have additional consequences when you have a DV charge. So you can't have firearms in your home or in your possession if you have a charge. Not even a conviction, just if you're charged with domestic violence. You can't be around guns or ammunition at all. If you own firearms, which is incredibly important here in Colorado Springs because we have so many military base and service members, you have to get rid of all guns. You have to make sure that you're not around them at all. So you can give them to a friend or a relative. You can sign an affidavit saying that you've given them away. You can sell them. A lot of our clients tend to go to family members and say, hey, please take my guns, sign this affidavit. I don't need these around me. So we go over those consequences, and then we walk them through what to expect in a criminal case, because domestic violence cases, they get started right away and you immediately are in court within the next couple of days. So you have your bond hearing when the person is in jail and you have a bond set. And then there are additional court dates that happen after that. If we need to request a protection order modification, so if you went to a bond hearing and you either the named victim wasn't there or it was going really quick and you didn't get to request things, we can request modifications of the protection orders. If a keep the peace wasn't given, we can request those. At least at the beginning of the stages, these are things we're talking about.
Yeah, okay. No, that's good to know. That's good. So with all of this happening, there's a lot of moving parts and it's quick, especially in these cases. So when do clients, potential clients, when are they looking to hire? Are they hanging out in jail, still sitting there trying to get a hold of us? Is it right when they're released? When during all of this commotion?
So honestly, the biggest thing that we see with domestic violence cases is family members helping someone who's been charged.
Okay.
Because if you're in jail, you're not going to have a whole lot of access to Google lawyers or to call. You have a couple of phone calls. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times what we see is we see family members calling. I can't tell you how many times I've answered the phone and a mom is calling me saying, hey, my son was just arrested. Please help us. Okay. So the best thing to do, this is not a plug for us, I say this for any lawyer, pick your lawyer in Colorado Springs, whoever you like best, and have their number all the time. Make sure that you have their phone number. You know that if you or a friend or a family member is arrested for domestic violence, you can call our law firm. For Right Law Group, we're pretty cool in that we have 24-hour answering services, and it's not like a service overseas like a lot of these law firms. We actually have a staff member from our team answering the phone. We don't have any private contractors answering the phone. So if you call our law firm, we have people calling in the middle of the night saying, hey, the cops are at my door, I'm about to get arrested. We say, okay, here's what we need to do, next steps. We'll get a retainer in place. We'll get entered on your case and start watching. I even had a couple of clients call me from the back of the cop car saying, hey, I need you on my case. So the short answer is that people can call at any time, but typically what we see is we see family members calling. Or we see people calling because they know that there's an open warrant and they need someone to help them through that. Or people call us right after jail. So that's kind of a broad answer, but anyone can hire. The way that we do it at Right Law Group is if you have a friend or family member that you're trying to get us to help, we can work with you to set up a retainer payment, but then we'll work with the client individually, set up a retainer agreement with them, and they are the client. But you can easily help someone out and pay their legal fees up front to make sure that you have someone there for them without them having to come into the office. We do everything remotely, so no one has to come into the office anyway. Works speedy quick.
It's good stuff. So sooner the better, but we're here whenever you need it.
Pretty much.
So another thing that obviously we do, since we're helping in these cases, is trying to defend our client against a charge. So what kind of things can we do to help them out with that kind of thing? Because that's it's a big part of the representation we offer. So what kind of things do we help with that?
So there are a lot of different defenses in domestic violence cases. Sorry, we have a trash truck. It's the beauty of Facebook Live.
It's good.
So one of the big things that we're seeing here in Colorado Springs, like I was saying, with so many service members and veterans here, we have a lot of people who this is not normal behavior for them. A lot of times arguments can get out of control. People react in a situation that they normally wouldn't react in. And a lot of our clients, especially my favorite clients to work with, are people who are suffering from PTSD. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who either have PTSD from service-related issues or PTSD from previous rapes or assaults. And if you know anything about PTSD, you get all worked up and you get in this cycle and you don't even know what's happening. Like you're just lashing out, and it's something where a crime has been committed possibly, but what's actually going on is a deeper underlying psychological issue. So for a lot of our clients, what I do is I talk with them and I say, okay, let's talk about what happened leading up to this. Like not even this charge. Let's talk about what's going on with you personally. Who are you as an actual person? Oh, we have someone saying hello. Hello. I can't tell what your name is, but it's MB Marketing.
There we go. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Oh, and Kristen David's here too. Thanks for joining us, Kristen. So what we do is we really dig in and we say, okay, well, what's going on with you? is this normally what you're like? Which no one's ever like. This is the worst time in someone's life.
Yep.
And then we're kind of working backwards from that. So a lot of what we do for our defenses, we're looking for defenses, not even just legal defenses, but human defenses. How do I make this person be much more approachable? How do I show the DA that my client is a human being with all of these other things going on, not just a case file? Some legal defenses that we have, aside from psychological issues that may be going on, other defenses are intoxication. If someone's drunk, we can get them into treatment, help them. We have a number of treatment providers that we partner up with to make sure that we're working with them. One is really active on our Facebook groups. If Sean's here, hey Sean. And we work with them on that, getting them into treatment, trying to make sure that they are stable and okay before we move forward on their criminal case. But sometimes, and this is really, really difficult, but sometimes people get charged when they were the person who's actually the victim in the case.
Yeah, we've seen that.
We see it time and time again. People think that if you call the police, you're going to be safe. But unfortunately, there are times when someone who's truly a domestic violence abuser can twist the system. Yeah. So what I see happening so many times in our practice is we have, usually it's women, but it can be men as well, call the police because they are in danger and they're afraid. And they have been hurt in some way and they've been trying to get out of the situation, and the cops show up and they're saying, please help me, I'm being assaulted, I'm being hurt, but the other person has marks on them. So we see this with like scratches and bite marks, those types of things, where if you're trying to get out of a really bad situation and you call the cops, but the other person has visible injuries, that person who called the cops can be arrested, and it's awful. But in that case, we have a very solid self-defense claim. So many things that we see with domestic violence cases are, if there's someone who's being hurt and they're trying to get out of the situation, women usually have longer nails than men, and so if they're trying to scratch their way out, other more serious injuries don't show up. So if someone's being strangled, that hurts your neck, but you're not going to necessarily see any injuries. And if a woman is trying to claw someone off of her, that other person's going to have marks. So it's why it's so critically important that people understand that domestic violence is a very fluid thing. The charges can be very difficult to parse out what's going on until you actually dig in and see it. And in the heat of the moment, unfortunately, our police are often very overworked. They see injuries. They say, okay, someone's injured. This person's going to jail. So what we really try to specialize in is working with people with domestic violence, where they've had PTSD in their past, or with victims who are trying to get out of a bad situation, but then the system was flipped and they end up in trouble. We also work with people who just have a bad night. Sometimes people do things, sometimes people react in ways that they shouldn't, and they do have a criminal charge. And those people, if they're saying, they come to me and they say, look, I know what I did was wrong, but I'm trying to make sure that this doesn't completely destroy my life. I love working with clients like that who can say, yes, I know I did the right thing by calling you and I want to get on the right path, but I've got to actually say what I did was wrong here. We work with all range of people. So defense cases can be anywhere from psychological defense to self-defense to, I messed up, but now I need help making sure this doesn't affect the rest of my life.
That's good. I was gonna, when the cops show up, it's up to them to decide who's going where. So, in the heat of the moment or with everything going on, it's, it's up to them. So it can be either one of the parties.
Well, and that's one thing too. So I know some criminal lawyers are all like, we are against the cops, never talk to police, which you shouldn't talk to police if you're about to be arrested. But our firm, we really pride ourselves, we're prior prosecutors. We have great, great respect for law enforcement. I have a number of friends that are law enforcement and still in law enforcement. It's not, with domestic violence cases, it's really difficult because it's not always easy to tell in a heated moment what's going on. So a lot of the times, some of what I do with my clients is I'm talking to them like, this isn't necessarily the cop's fault. Sometimes police make mistakes, but sometimes they can't tell. There's a whole bunch going on. There are kids screaming in the background. They see someone with injuries, they make an arrest. So a lot of what we do is not just legal, but it's kind of working through the injustices that are in our system right now, the inadequacies in figuring out what should actually be charged in a case, and really trying to make sure that we are serving as a conduit for all parties, law enforcement, prosecutors, and our clients, to realize that this was a one-time thing. This was something that should never have happened, but we're getting back on the right track to make sure that our client is safe, that the community is safe, and we're having respect for the system and the justice system and law enforcement while still trying to correct their lives and get them back on track. Yeah, like Yolanda said, being a human being, making sure that not just our clients are seen as human beings, but we as lawyers try to make sure our clients understand the police are human beings, the DAs are human beings. Our firm is really focused on doing the right thing, which is why we're Right Law Group. And sometimes the right thing is educating people on, hey, a lot of things have happened in this case. Let's calm down. Let's take a second. Let's talk it out, and let's make sure that we're all proceeding in the right way.
So that's going to be as far as we get for this this live. And like I said, in 2 weeks, we're going to start from here and go through the rest of just how the case works and the support and resources that we have for our clients. So yeah, we'll go over the timeline, and then we're also going to include, there are a lot of different protection orders, and there's a lot of different information, and there's a lot, and it's hard to understand. So we're also going to explain a little bit about that and just try and clarify things based on questions that we get asked a lot.
I haven't seen if we had any questions today. I didn't see any here, but if people are watching this later, they can put questions down below. Caitlin and I will see those.
We'll look at these, and then we'll definitely add those questions to our live in 2 weeks when we keep going on with this. But thanks so much for tuning in.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Have a great weekend.
Bye.